Hello again, it's me, Jane McDowell. Welcome to another episode of Heart Centered Conversations. And today I'm overjoyed to have as my guest Josie Gammell. Josie, say hello and tell us a bit about yourself and which book you have brought with you today.
Hello, Jane. Thank you so much for inviting me on, and I'm delighted to be with everyone. I hope you really get a lot from the next few minutes. The book I'm talking about today is one that this is a term that I think gets used frequently nowadays, but is absolutely 100% true in my context, in that this book really was a game changer for me. And it's a book by Susan Cain called Quiet: The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking.
Wow, yeah, that's a powerful title. Yeah.
Yep, 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 yep.
Mm.
And the reason it was such a game changer was because it caused me to reevaluate the way my personality works.
Uh-huh.
So I was very poorly in 2013, and I was living in Los Angeles at the time, and with my husband and two small children. And my mother came out to help take care of me for a month, and she left this book, I think, with a bit of a wink when she left. And so I, of course, was very intrigued by the title, and started reading it and thought, well, this will be really intriguing. And then in the introduction, I think Susan writes a questionnaire, and she says, if you're still unclear where you are on the introvert extrovert spectrum, take this questionnaire. So
Mm.
I book here, and there were 20 questions, and I answered yes to 14 of them. Right. I was like, oh, that's me. That's me. So it was things like, I prefer one-on-one conversations to group activities. I often prefer to express myself in writing. I enjoy solitude. I seem to care less than my peers about wealth, fame, and status. I dislike small talk. I enjoy speaking in depth about topics. I'm a good listener. I like to celebrate birthdays on a small scale.
Mm.
Um, I do my best work on my own. I feel drained after being out and about. That's a whopper. I often let calls go through to voicemail, pretty much always. If I had to choose,
Noted.
yes, exactly. If I had to choose, I'd prefer a weekend with absolutely nothing to do to one with too many things scheduled. I can concentrate easily. And I was going through going, oh, well, that's definitely me. Oh, no, that's me. Oh,
Mm.
no, that's me. That's me too. That's me. And I was suddenly like, what? Because I had grown up always believing and having it reflected back to me that I was really gregarious, very vivacious, very extrovert, very people oriented. I always have a funny story or a game or a joke or a blah, 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 blah. And then in 2013, my life ground to a shuddering halt, and I burnt out. I just completely burnt out. And reading this book, I thought, I'm denying half of who I am.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I had this really interesting thought. I was lying in bed and I thought, before the age of 5, I was known to be a very shy little girl. And I was thinking, where did she go?
Mm.
She hasn't been heard of for a long time. I was almost 50 at this point. And I realized we had a terrible tragedy when I was 5, in that my brother died in an accident. And I think what happened, well, I'm sure what happened, is that this very shy, um, contemplative, I mean, gregarious around my family and those I love, but outwardly very shy little girl, I think subconsciously realized she was going to be lost, and she just wouldn't be noticed because there was so much devastation around, that I became super extrovert. everything was exaggerated. I always had a story. I was always really ill. I wasn't slightly unwell. Do you know what I mean? Everything was big, big, big. And I
Yeah.
think it was the Stevie Smith, I'm not waving, I'm drowning.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah, definitely.
and then I'd gone into acting. I was an actor. So, but even that should have been kind of a giveaway. That should have been a giveaway because on stage or on film, you're constantly on and outward and interactive. And then when you're not, you stop. Right.
Yeah,
And I think what Susan's book gave me permission to do was to allow for the yin and yang in me. And really what she talks about is that the stereotypes of, extroverts being murder on the dance floor, party animal, introverts being, the librarian in It's a Wonderful Life, are really, really misleading
yeah,
because actually it's about where do you find your stimulus? Where do you get nourished? How are you fed? And I have two children. My daughter is 21 today,
yay,
actually.
happy birthday.
Happy birthday, SJ. Um, and my daughter and my son sort of reflect the two sides of me. I mean, obviously they're completely their own people, but it's interesting. SJ is massively extrovert. She's really like her dad, who is a really classic, strong extrovert. So I homeschooled for 3 years, and I would take them to the science museum, and I'd think, I've really ticked the box today. I've really done it. We've seen
Yeah.
dinosaurs, we've looked into the stars, all this kind of thing. We'd sit in LA traffic and we'd get home at 4:30. And my son and I, he's 2 years younger than his sister, would be more than happy then to just potter with our own little projects and just have a quiet rest of the day. My daughter would come through the door and she'd go, Mum, can we have a play date? Oh my gosh, no, no, we're not doing anything for the next 3 days. But so what she does in the book is she really turns our understanding of what it is to be extroverted and introverted on its head. And actually, there's a quote, if I may, that really sums
Absolutely.
it
Love
up.
that. Yeah.
She says, would you be surprised if I told you that the vaudevillian professor and the recluse who prefers a life of the mind are one and the same man? Maybe not, when you consider that we all behave differently depending on the situation.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if we're capable of such flexibility, does it even make sense to chart the differences between introverts and extroverts? Is the very notion of introversion, extroversion too pat a dichotomy?
Mm.
Introvert as sage philosopher, the extrovert as fearless leader, the introvert as poet or science nerd, the extrovert as jock or cheerleader.
Mm.
Aren't we all a little of both?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that hits a nail on the head. I know so many people who have been great inspirations in my life personally, who get up on stage and they are just amazing at presenting. And yet in the real life, they are very introverted. They do prefer those one-to-one conversations, those quieter spaces. And it does exhaust them when they're out amongst, um,
Absolutely. And
yeah.
it's like you need to build yourself up for
Mm.
that.
And
Where
to
would you
protect yourself as well, right?
well, yes,
Yeah.
exactly. I mean, keep boundaries. Where would you say you are, Jane, on the introvert extrovert? If I have you ever done like Myers-Briggs or something on
I think I have a long time ago. I tend not to do very well in those kind of tests because I always see an alternative answer that's not on the sheet. Like, well, hang on,
Yes,
so so I think when I was younger, I thought of myself as an extrovert, but I think it was more that I needed or wanted some attention. And the older I've got, the more I have come to really enjoy my own company and doing my own thing, and yet I still love to be on stage and present. I love to talk about things that I'm passionate about, but I don't. the thing for me, and this is how I got into helping people I help now, is that when because I used to do some drama, I wasn't professional like you, but I still did loads of stuff on stage, and I could get on stage really confidently embodying somebody else's character. So I
Yeah,
wasn't
for
being
sure.
me.
Classic,
So
classic
yeah,
actor.
yeah.
Right.
So I get on stage, I loved it. But when I had to get on stage and be myself when I was presenting in my business, for example, that was such a different
Mm.
energy and a different level of confidence that you need to do that. And so that's been something I've been working on for quite a few years. And yeah, and that's why I'm really passionate about helping other people to do the same thing, because there are so many people out there who have got fantastic knowledge and skills, experience that they can share with other people, and yet they don't have the confidence. They suffer from what people might call imposter syndrome. I really hate that because there is nothing, somebody's made up this term imposter syndrome like it's some kind of disease or health condition or something, and it's not. It's just that people are making decisions to do something brave and they're stepping outside of their comfort zone. And of course, we're all going to feel, oh my God, can I do this? That's part of the journey. It's not a syndrome. It's not something that we're suffering from. It's just that we're stepping into our greatness. That's going off on a tangent a bit. But so do I think I'm an introvert or an extrovert? I think I'm a bit of both. Yeah, I think that dichotomy that she talks of that you just read about, um yeah, there's so much in between, and it's like the depths of the ocean. Some of it's shallow and some of it's deeper than you can imagine.
Absolutely. And one of the things she looks at is how much we're missing as a society by going instantly towards the extroverts.
Yeah.
Because the extroverts are the ones she did a really interesting study, I think at Harvard or MIT, one of those. I think it was Harvard, where she got, it was a think tank, and it was who was most valued in the group. And it ended up that the extroverts were the ones who spoke up first, who just externally processed, who threw out the idea that first came into their head and da da da. But often it was the introverts who said nothing but were reflecting that actually came up with a better directive in the end.
Mm,
The key was, were they waiting for the thought processes of the people who were not thinking like extroverts to get there? And there's a really interesting quote she uses of Einstein, where Einstein said, "I'm not that smart. I just stay with problems longer."
yeah.
And I think that's a really, really interesting idea. You
Yeah.
know, that she talks about how extroverts are very good at spotting what is, and introverts are very good at contemplating what if.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's how I think we end up being innovators,
Mm,
which is really what has brought me to what I'm doing now, which is
mm,
a coach and a communications coach. And about 4 years ago, I was thinking, this is crazy. Why haven't we distilled all the principles of effective communication into something we can actually grasp, something
yeah.
we can
Yeah.
hold on to?
Yeah.
And
Tell us
that's
more,
crazy. Yeah.
because I
So,
know that you've developed this
hmm,
technique
yeah,
and this tool. So tell us a
that's
bit more
right.
about this because it's
Okay. So look,
fascinating.
I've got it right here. I've got it right
Ta-da!
here. This is a
Yeah.
voice pebble.
Yeah.
But no, I did. I thought this is crazy because people love learning how to communicate more effectively and find it really hard to retain the information. So
Yeah.
after a coaching session, they go, right, that's it. I'm going to change. But of course, change takes practice and repetition and time. I was thinking, wouldn't it be fantastic if we take all that we know about being really effective as a communicator and distill it into its simplest form and then anchor it in an object. So
Yeah.
it can become a mind-body connection, literally a haptic tool, right? So you can pick it up and think, oh, I know what I need to think about. I know what I need to do. And so what I did over the past 4 years was I created something called a voice pebble, which is literally a porcelain pebble. And the the principles of communication I've distilled into 5 letters which make up voice. So it's Vo1ce. And it's exactly what you were just saying, Jane, about imposter syndrome. How we come across largely depends on how we're feeling.
Mm.
If we feel that everyone's going to think that we haven't done the work, or we're not bright, or blah, 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 whatever it is, that's going to impact whatever we say. So the very first thing we have to do is we have to ground ourselves in our unique, unchangeable value.
Yeah.
And that's the V of voice, and is really the foundation on which everything else is built. Until you recognize your worthiness to be heard and your unique contribution, you know, everything else is going to be a moot point, because it's going to be so colored by the fact that you can still hear your maths teacher telling you that you're dumb. Great aunt going, don't be an artist, you'll never make a living.
Yeah.
Tips,
Yeah.
right? So that's the first thing. And then when we're grounded in our worth, and feel a bedrock confidence in that, we can put ourselves thankfully to one side and focus on the other person.
Yeah.
Think about what's going on for Jane this morning. What's she thinking about? What are her priorities? What does she need to hear, or want to hear, or hope to hear? And that's the part of communication that we so often miss, which is that we're not thinking about our audience, whether it's a child, whether it's 600 people in an auditorium, whether it's your boss and you're going in for a raise. We're just so focused on what we want, what we need, our own agenda. And we're really missing a trick, because what we need to do is, all effective communication is two-way, isn't it? It's engagement. So really standing in the shoes of the other person and thinking about it, thinking about life and the situation that you're discussing from their viewpoint, will transform the way you connect. And immediately you'll start thinking about a win-win rather than a me versus you, right?
Yeah.
So value other, then you've got one, which is the one thing you're trying to do each time, because we're all trying to do too much, right? We go into a meeting and we're going to go, right, we've got 4 objectives.
Yeah.
Get all of them done, you know, and everyone goes out confused. They're like, well, I heard Brussels, I heard the report needs to be in by next week, and I heard we need a new site manager, right? Because too many objectives. One objective. What is it? So you've really got to pick your one thing. You're not going to solve world hunger at this meeting, but you can make a first step. What's the first step each time? So there's your one, value other one. Then C is for clarity. So once you know your one thing, don't have more than 3 points ever.
Mm.
Because we won't, you know, it's 1, 2, 3 many. And you're like,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
I can't remember what you started with, right? And then the last one is ending. So value other, one thing, clarity, ending. We never think about how we're going to end. What's your action point? What's your strong finish? Let's do it, Jane. Let's
Yeah.
get out there and really reevaluate how we work and what our character is made of and how best we can make our contribution in the world. That's a great finish,
It
rather than
is.
thank you for your time. That's really great.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's
You
what we
always want
tend to
there to
do.
be a next step, don't you? And also, just picking up on the ending, I was at a networking event last week, and it was 24 people. It was a really long, long table, and everyone's standing up doing their 60 seconds, which inevitably meant that lots of people
No,
spoke so quickly and with such jargon that I was left thinking,
I know.
I don't know what it is you do or what you need from me. But the one thing that really got me is so many people at the end, they would start to sit down and mutter, mutter, mutter as they sat down. I'm like, what?
I
You've
know. I know.
just lost out on the last few seconds that you had to communicate effectively.
And isn't it the truth that a really mediocre presentation can be transformed by a strong ending? Like, it can be fairly, you know, vanilla. And then someone goes, so by next quarter, we're going to blur. Are you with me?
Yeah,
Right. And everyone's like, oh my gosh, that was fantastic. You know,
yeah,
it's someone else who's actually delivered something really solid, well crafted, and then goes, and come and see me if you have any questions.
yeah,
You know, and
yeah,
you go, hands, you know,
yeah,
and it's so important. It's so important. So so that's a classic example, coming back to the book. That's a classic example of, I wanted to sit with the problem rather than getting frustrated, because I kept, I was doing a lot of coaching with some of the big banks in Canary Wharf. And even for their most senior players, they're not willing to devote enough time in coaching to affect real change.
Mm.
Right. So ultimately, that makes us as coaches look like the ones who aren't doing a good job. And I was like, that's really unjust because we're doing a great job. But it's like, if you just have a day of coaching, it's like having an induction at the gym and then
Exactly.
you never go to the gym again.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
you love the trainer, you love the gym, you could see the potential of all the machines and you go, yes, I'm really going to do that. And then you go back to your regular life and you never do it again.
yeah, yeah.
But now you've got something that in a very short period of time, as you use it as a habit, and it prompts you, there are
Yeah,
5 stages in the pebble itself that reminds you, I need to think about my own value. Oh, and now I need to focus on Jane. What's going on for her? Okay, what's the one thing we're trying to do in this meeting? What's the one thing I'm trying to convey in this email or this phone call or this conversation? So what are the examples, or what's going to really drive that home? And then what do I want her to do about it?
yeah,
And very quickly, you'll have developed a new neural pathway so that, like a keyboard, you're not going A, N, D space, T, H. You're just going, and the next thing.
yeah.
So it's level, you just go, oh, I know how to do this. And it never changes. The principles of communication, as you know, Jane, never change.
Yeah, yeah. That's fantastic. So I'm fascinated about how you came to embody that in a tactile object. That
Yes.
was there any books or people that you met that inspired you to do that, or was it because you're quite
Literally in middle of the
kinesthetic
night.
yourself?
It was
Yeah.
literally the middle of the night. And I woke up and I thought, I was infuriated. I was infuriated because no one was remembering the coaching. And so
Uh-huh.
I did that thing about introverts sit with what if. And I just thought, all right, then. Okay. And this is what I said to the kids when they were growing up. I go, anyone can point out a problem.
Mm.
Okay. No one talk unless you've got a solution. Right. So I was doing the same thing in bed. I was like, okay, come on, be serious. What would help? What would help? I thought, well, why don't we just have something you can hold in your hand? I mean, that would just be so obvious. Something you could carry with you. You could have it in your jacket pocket, keep it on your desk. What about that? And the funny thing is that I then thought, well, what would those principles be? And that came quite quickly.
Yeah.
Name came quite quickly. But I am gifted in many ways, Jane, but I am
Obviously.
not a sculptor. I am not.
Oh, how
So
disappointing, Josie.
I,
I think
I,
you're not trying hard enough.
dang it, just that one thing. Everything else I've mastered.
Everything else you're perfect in.
Perfect, of course. So my sister said to me, why don't you go and get a block of clay and see what you come up with? Well, let me tell you, Jane, I came up with something that could have been a lethal weapon. I mean, it was like, boom, you could. So I have a very good friend, Anna, who is a brilliant artist and also trained as an architect and in design. So I gave her the clay and I said, Anna, I need something that you can hold in your hand that has these 5 stages embedded in it. Off you go. She came up with 3 designs, and one of them was a pebble. And I love pebbles. I don't know about
Mm,
you. As soon as I go on a beach,
yes.
especially a British beach, I pick up a pebble because it helps you
Yep.
think.
Yep.
It's grounding, isn't it? And so I went, I love pebbles. I've got pebbles all over my house. Got pebbles on the mantelpiece, everywhere.
Yeah. I do too. Yeah. I've got them in my pockets in the car. Yeah. Yeah.
Of course, right? And from all over the world, you go, oh, I'll take a pebble, right? So I went, that's exactly in line with the thinking of the whole thing. And then I found some absolutely brilliant design engineers in London. They're called the Imagination Factory. And they went to enormous lengths. I mean, talk about being passionate about what you do. The first meeting I had with them, I had the pebble in hand at that point, but they refined the design so it was more streamlined, which made it even more effective. But the very first meeting I had with them, they went right back to the beginning of human history and why we gain so much confidence and authority from holding things in our hands.
Yeah. It's that kinesthetic thing
Exactly, whether it's
going
an
on, isn't it?
ant or a rabbit's foot or a scarab or a rosary or worry beads. I mean, it was just so fabulous. And so it's this thing about there are really no new ideas. Do you know what I mean? I think
Like
that's,
William Blake said, there's nothing new under the sun, right?
well, exactly, exactly. And that's scripture as well, you know. So it's like, um, really, it's just such an obvious idea. It's
Mm,
such an obvious idea. So I created it 'cause I couldn't believe we didn't have it. And I was saying to a colleague recently, I said, it seems so crazy. We've got all these apps, all this
yeah.
technology, all these books. Why haven't we got something as simple as this that's got nothing to do with a screen, that's got no component parts, that will never fall apart? I mean, the porcelain is indestructible. And he said, well, sometimes the best ideas are the last to be thought of. And then he said, do you realize that we put men on the moon before we put wheels on a suitcase?
Really? Is that true?
Isn't that amazing? And you're just like, isn't that a perfect analogy though? Because it's like
Yeah.
the apps are there to help you think more clearly, to breathe properly, to, you know, I'm sure there are all sorts of apps and certainly books and
Mm,
articles. It's nothing haptic. It's
yeah,
just
yeah.
nothing haptic. So it's very exciting. So
It is.
it's currently I'm working in Europe, the UK, and the States. And tomorrow, the world, Jane, you too will
Well,
have a pebble on your desk. But no, it's very
lovely.
exciting. It's very exciting.
Yeah.
And all because my introvert side sat with the what if,
Mm,
you know.
love it. And so I think when we spoke last, you mentioned you were writing a book. So,
I am. I
yeah.
am. So one of those questions, you remember, I prefer to express myself in writing. When I
Mm,
was going through my divorce, I wrote a blog for 5 years and it was really for me, you
yeah.
know, really cathartic. And I then shared it with friends just to, you know, for whatever it was worth, you know, sort of companionship. And it was very healing for me and also very nourishing. So I thought, I can write a book. I can write
Mm.
a book. I love writing a book. Oh my gosh. So unbelievably difficult. I mean, it's been really humbling. I'm just like, I've got loads of stories. Yeah, I can totally do this.
Yeah.
And literally, I've got an absolutely brilliant book editor who I hired to keep my feet to the fire
Yeah.
because I can tell you now, Jane, for sure, I'd have stopped. I mean, it's been so hard. I mean, I'm in my groove now, but I reckon it took me 2 months. In the end, I was just writing lists of words. I was like, just get something down,
Yeah.
something, just get anything down.
Yeah.
You know, I sent it over to this Georgia Vargas, my lovely book editor, and she'll go, no, there's stuff here. And then she will tease it out and go, well, you can. Another book on that basis is, have you ever read Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott?
No, I haven't.
Fantastic book on writing. Anne Lamott,
Mm.
I think everything she writes is treasure. But really a very funny and also very wise book about the writing process. And it comes from her brother. Her father was a writer, and her brother had to do a school project that he'd had the whole year to do on birds
Sounds familiar.
following for the following day, and he hadn't started. And his father sat down with him at the kitchen table and just said, just take it bird by bird, buddy, bird by bird.
Mm,
That's the way that you write. You just take one tiny idea at a time. And actually, when I worked out that, she talks about looking through a 1 inch frame and just describing everything in the 1 inch frame.
yeah. Yeah. Because then you don't get overwhelmed with the whole panoramic
I know,
vista and where do I start? And
I
yeah,
know. I mean, words are just so extraordinary, aren't they?
they are. They're so
That
powerful.
they're so powerful, and because they are really a reflection of our individuality. Like we all use the same words and yet we say such unique and incredible things. Love it. Are you a reader? Are you a big
I
reader?
certainly am, hence this podcast about books, because I love them. And I
I
love sharing our kind of experiences through reading, whether it's
absolutely,
self-help, fiction.
absolutely, absolutely. I have to say I'm still old school in that I do like a book in my hand.
Oh, me too. I like that whole kinesthetic thing,
I mean,
and for me, I remember the book clearer if I've
yes,
seen it on the page. So there's a visual thing going on as well.
me
I quite
too.
often remember whereabouts in the book something happened or something is said.
Yeah.
And then
Well,
I'm also
can you also
terror for
visualize the page?
underline.
I know it's on the top left. It's somewhere at the top
Yeah,
left, 2 paragraphs down, which
yeah.
is how personally I got through my O levels back in the day and my A levels. Did
Me
you?
too. Yeah. And
You
learning script
underline it in
when I was in
green and you
college.
underline something else in
Yeah,
red.
yeah,
It's in
yeah.
red, it's on the right, it's on the right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Very
yeah.
handy. Very
Yeah,
handy.
absolutely. I
Yeah.
found it really handy learning scripts as well.
Oh yeah, for sure. For sure, for sure. And all those memory games. I'm knocking on the door. This is what I say. I'm standing in the lobby. This is what I say. I go into the kitchen. This is what I say.
Yeah, yeah.
All those good things.
Oh, well, listen, it's been absolutely fascinating talking to you, Josie, and thank you so much for joining me. I hope
Absolute
everyone
pleasure.
watching and listening has enjoyed our conversation. Please do remember to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next episode. Take care.
Fantastic.
Thanks so
Lovely to
much.
be with you all.
Thanks,
Bye.
Josie.